Добрый день.
Good afternoon. Let's start our work. Tatiana, please stay where you are. So let's start. Everyone who wished to join us will join us later. And today we will speak mostly about campus. Campus as city, and we'll also speak about the new role of social infrastructure in the city, in the modern megacity. It's true that many participants, and by the way, and delegates and the organizers of today's session were involved in various projects on the campus in Moscow and in Russia. All of a sudden, we have several projects appeared, which appeared either which appeared, and we remember the Far Eastern University, and there are some other universities. We see how campuses change, and they become the part of a modern megalopolis. I cannot say that they start from the scratch, but at least they develop from some institutes. So I would like to introduce our guests here. We have here Sharon Har, the author of the book, The City as Campus. So Sharon Har is from the United States. We also have here Patrick Shane, Director for Economic Development and Paris-Saclay Development Authority, France. Then we also have here Wang Hui. He is a partner and the founder of the Urban Architecture and Design Office from China. His topic is very close to us. He will tell us about the centralized planning when building the modern campus. Of course, there are some nuances when we speak about our campus. And here we also have Tatiana Klechko, Senior Research Assistant of the Institute of Humanitarian Development of Megalopolis. And we also have with us one more person, Andrei Chernyakov, the first Vice President of the International Academy of Architects in Moscow. Thank you for coming here. So we'll start with the presentations made by our panelists. After that, there will be discussions, and those of you who have questions will stay here till the end, because at the end we'll have a Q&A session for you and the experts sitting in the first row. I would like also to introduce them. Here we have Viktor Sidnev, Mayor of Troitsky District, who has been the mayor for 8 years. We discussed one of the projects with Mr. Chernyakov, and this project is about Troitsk. Troitsk is a small town of Moscow region. So here is also Nikolai Rumyantsev, the deputy managing director of Inteca, and he is also the head of the project in Inteca Corporation. And as you know, Inteca is one of the players of the business and governmental relations. And I hope some more experts will join us. So Sharon, your floor is yours. No, Sharon Har, is a professor of Michigan University. The floor is yours.
So first, I'd like to thank the organizers of the Moscow Urban Forum for inviting me to speak at this exciting convocation. And before I begin, I want to note that my presentation is offered from a distinctly American perspective and from my position as an academic, an architect, and urban designer, not as an urban planner or policy expert. In the brief amount of time that I have, I'd like to touch upon two topics. First, the development of the concept of the campus and its relationship to the city in the United States over the past century. And second, the role that the university in particular and the production of knowledge in general is playing in the physical and social transformation of the 21st century city. Historically, the campus has been understood as a container for material things, the creation of new knowledge, and the transfer of this knowledge from faculty to students. Yet the traditional American campus, conceived as a place apart, is being modified today through increasing porosity with the surrounding urban environment and the advent of online education. But in the 21st century, the university campus is as much a network as a container. The functions of higher education are to create information as well as to exchange new ideas. The most exclusive institutions are in constant competition for new talent. They share many of these qualities with the most competitive global cities. So let's start with a story that conveys a relatively straightforward idea of the American university. On the front page of its January 27, 2013 Sunday edition, the New York Times revealed a startling account of philanthropy. Over 50 years, then Mayor Michael Bloomberg of New York City had given over $1.1 billion American dollars to Baltimore's Johns Hopkins University, the place where, according to the New York Times, he escaped the crushing boredom of his high school and discovered an urban campus of stately Georgian buildings brimming with new people and ideas. The Johns Hopkins University that Bloomberg experienced originated in the early 20th century. The model of the campus as a city of learning, a mission-specific community constituted within an all-encompassing form, its own built-in urbanity, separated from the city, even as it might sit squarely within it. As we will see in a moment, this experience later impacted his ideas for campuses in New York City itself. This idea of the campus as constitutive of its own urban ideal has not disappeared, but has begun to change. It's changed very much in its form. For instance, we can see the idea of an internal urbanism at play today in places like the University of Cincinnati's Main Street, which runs through the center of its campus, a dynamic urban-like experience in the location where we once might have expected a quad or a lawn, as is typical of an American university. I'd like to contrast this internal urbanism to the interior urbanism of the McCormick Tribune Campus Center at Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago, where, according to its architects, the Office of Metropolitan Architecture, rather than stacking activities in a multi-storied building, we opted to arrange each programmatic element of the campus center in a dense single plane that would foster an urban condition. Within IIT's buildings, paths link the multiplicity of activities via a network of interior streets, plazas, and urban islands that form their own neighborhoods. A 24-hour commercial, entertainment, academic, recreation, and other urban elements in microcosm, all in one building. Yet these urban-like experiences are simulated in these campuses rather than produced from an encounter with the actual city. In this respect, McCormick Tribune Center is the opposite of what is now known as Loop University, just a few miles to its north, where over 50,000 matriculating students belonging to over half a dozen institutions of higher education attend classes, live, eat, and socialize within the context of Chicago's downtown Loop and South Loop neighborhoods. Here, the desire of undergraduates to attend school in a dense and vibrant urban setting and professional graduate students to co-locate among the law offices, courts, and businesses of their future professions has produced a 24-hour revitalization of the central city, which many urbanists see as a model for university city real estate development and other kinds of new urban forms. In Loop University, the campus space and urban space are one and the same. In addition to the student experience, the research enterprise of universities has had considerable impact on campus design and the role of the university in shaping space outside its borders. The historian Margaret O'Mara describes the rise of a new form of campus in the middle of the 20th century, the city of knowledge, an externalization of the research capacities of the university to suburban corporate campuses and research parks, the latter best exemplified by Stanford University Research Park and the growth of what we now know as Silicon Valley that it inspired. These new cities of knowledge, to quote O'Mara, were engines of scientific production filled with high-tech industries, homes for scientific workers and their families, with research universities at their heart. They were the birthplaces of great technological innovations that have transformed the way we work and live, homes for entrepreneurship and at times astounding wealth, magnets for high-skilled workers and highly productive industries. Cities of knowledge are, in fact, the ultimate post-industrial city, close quote. A Google Earth view of Silicon Valley that we might look at today, and the image on, let's see, your right, I believe, reveals the impact of this suburban model. Islands of corporate research floating in a sea of parking and access roads, communities of researchers co-located but internally secured by moats of parking lots or garages and controlled access, even more bounded than the academic campuses they imitated. We can see the economic impact of major universities on regional growth. For example, on the right, we see how venture capital investment travels up the northeast corridor of the United States, from the University of Virginia in Charlottesville through New York and up to Boston, and the research engines of Harvard University and MIT. We also see heavy investment in other locations. Ann Arbor, Michigan, for instance, where my university, the University of Michigan, is located. But the primacy of Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley model of suburban development, is declining. As we see on the left, many technology entrepreneurs are shunning suburban sprawl. San Francisco is increasingly as important as Silicon Valley for small startups and many of the employees of large technology companies. The desire for proximity and the experience of urbanity, diversity, and density is generating new kinds of clusters. Technology and other business incubators, co-work spaces, and new forms of social life and pop-up activity scattered within the densest parts of the city. This is exemplified in the website Digital NYC, recently launched by the current mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, to promote technology development throughout largely Manhattan, but also the rest of the 5 boroughs of New York. And we can see a kind of very active website to kind of promote this sort of activity. What I might call googly culture from Google, in that culture, innovation occurs through encounters rather than hierarchy in corporate spaces that reject the regimentation of mid-20th century corporate culture. Such culture is driving the design of new urban buildings and spaces. This serendipitous space, both physical and virtual, is a hallmark of contemporary startup culture and what motivates 21st century young entrepreneurs to choose cities such as San Francisco, Seattle, and New York over the suburbs that they are likely to have grown up in. And this is the kind of thing that is inspiring Digital NYC and other sorts of developments of its kind. These trends make me actually question another of former Mayor Bloomberg's interests in higher education, the Cornell NYC Tech Campus for Graduate Education in Applied Arts, which he helped to promote not long before the end of his term as mayor. It will be built on industrialized land on Roosevelt Island in New York City's East River. The majority of the building's build-out is campus-oriented, but only 1/3 of these spaces must be for academic purposes. The rest, research space, conference facilities, hotels, retail, and partner R&D facilities suggest the beginning of a city of knowledge technically located in New York City, but unfortunately held at a distance from it by dint of the limited access created by the island setting. As a consequence, although it is too early to tell at this point, its buildings will likely promote the kind of interior urbanism of a Googleplex or the IIT Student Center, or perhaps a traditional American campus, rather than a more interactive exchange between its users and the city at large. Finally, by contrast, many universities are attempting to open up their borders to the city at large. Marilyn Jordan Taylor, formerly a partner at Skidmore, Owings, Merrill, now the dean at the architecture program at the University of Pennsylvania, has referred to the new Columbia University Manhattanville campus in Upper Manhattan as what she says, campus but not campus. Writing of SOM's work with the Renzo Piano Building Workshop, she has stated, and this is a quote, "Our collaboration is intended to create a place of transparency, porosity, and urbanity, where the energy of the city and academy flow together." And that's the close of her quote. By contrast to Columbia's Beaux-Arts Morningside campus, its traditional one, with its perimeter buildings walling off the neighboring context, the design of the Manhattanville campus, as you can sort of see in this rendering in this image, allows the street grid to run through it, provides outdoor space to the public, reserves the ground floor for public and commercial uses, and revitalizes a part of the city that has really been left to decay and disinvestment. But we know, even as the physical place of the campus has become spatially discontinuous through the migration of teaching to virtual space, the opening up of formerly gated spaces to neighboring communities, and the dispersal of facilities around the urban fabric, old town and gown divisions still exist. There's still a controversy, a discomfort between the city and its campuses. And the social, cultural, and economic clusters that make up this new city of knowledge also contribute to gentrification and income inequality, monoculture, and a decline in the role of the making of things, something that, as an architect, I'm still very interested in. And these are issues and ideas that I think it's important to consider and that I hope we have an opportunity to discuss this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. And perfect timing, actually. We have a lot of questions, but let's summarize them after all speakers. И сейчас я предоставляю слово Ярославу Ивановичу Кузьминову, от специалиста.
Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Kuzmin, the representative of the westernmost university. He is the head of the most western university of Russia. He has absolutely different experience, and he has the experience of the new young university in the huge megacity. So I will speak about the state of the Russian universities in general, which are located in large cities. So most of Russian universities are located in large cities, as you know. If someone shows me how to do that, how to use the slides. So we have 4 types of campus organization. So the first is when the campus is isolated and it's located on the outskirts, in the outskirts of the city. It's well developed in the United States. And rarely it can be applied to Europe. Now that Oxford and Cambridge, these are the campus in the medium-sized city, and the city was formed by the campus. As for Russia, Skolkovo can be considered such a campus. So Skolkovo has a close interaction within the university itself. And in such campuses, usually students have a possibility to live, to stay in. There are dormitories, but there is no close cooperation with the city. And I would like to mention the Far Eastern University in on Ruski Island. This was one of the attempts to have a university isolated on the island. The second type is more typical for Russia. This is the isolated campus, but located within the city boundaries. And I could say that such campuses are widespread not only in Russia, but also in China. So usually there is a campus, a closed campus built within the city. I know that Shanghai universities are built based on this basis. Isolated campus within the city. As for the first type of campus, it has several advantages. Such campuses have more connections with the city, and such universities work easier with the students. And by the way, the students live not in the campus, but in the city. It is important for Russian universities, and not only for Russian, but for European universities as well. The third type of campuses is even more typical for large Russian cities. These are universities which have buildings scattered all over the city. The High School of Economics conducted a research how universities are organized, which are located in Moscow. Out of 120 universities located in Moscow, at least half of universities have their buildings scattered all over the city, and there is no integrity.
We have a number of examples when the university is located in 1 hour or 1.5 hour distance from the dormitories. Sometimes you have to travel for 1 hour or even more by public transportation to another building of your university, what actually makes this study even not so comfortable. So it is a chaotic development of the Russian universities, quite typical for the post-Soviet time, when the new buildings and the dormitories were constructed on the free sites. Sometimes the sites were normally allocated on a particular distance from the main university buildings. It causes many problems. For example, it overloaded the public transportation system in the city. It also caused time losses for teachers and students. We also calculated that a student of a high school of economics, which attends the classes in the center of Moscow and lives in the dormitory, which is located in Odintsovo, so he has to spend around 6 years to study at our university. Spends 1 year in the traffic, so around 17.5% of the whole time when he is awake. It's absolutely clear that this form is absolutely inefficient. And finally, the internal connectivity of the university suffers too, because the connectivity is very, very low. We think that we have to go several ways at the same time now. When it is possible, we need to construct isolated campuses in the city, and when there is a suitable site. Belgrade undertook such an experiment from the National University of Belgrade. So, and now this university was constructed within the last 20 years and is located in the center of the city and is very consolidated. But normally all these efforts are quite expensive because the land in the city has a very significant market price. For example, our Higher School of Economics considered several options for relocation. We considered, for example, an opportunity to construct an isolated campus in Troitsk, it is within the new Moscow area. But in this case, the transport connectivity with the main city would be very poor and the university will suffer. So we also considered to construct a campus in Nagatino, but we also didn't manage to implement because the property relationships were quite complicated and the land was expensive. And finally, we decided together with the city administration that the Higher School of Economics will develop as a campus, the four-type campus. It means will be kind of city in a city. It will be a university with a transport connectivity among the buildings, and the time to travel time will be no more than 30 minutes from the buildings. So our walking distance plus the underground plus the walking time should not exceed 30 minutes. I will show you this model. So we decided to develop along the orange underground line, and we'll develop our buildings along this line in order to make its availability, transport-wise availability, at a higher level. What does this scheme of location give to us? In this case, is the campus, when we have several buildings located a certain distance from each other, but they are well connected. In this case, it can resolve the transportation problem, and sometimes it is even not so bad, even not worse than at the Moscow University. For example, if you would like to travel at the Moscow University from the Faculty of Economics to the Faculty of Biology, you may need 30 minutes to walk because there is no transportation opportunities at all. But here we have a very significant advantage for the university and for the city. And the advantage is that we get a new connectivity, that this university can get better connected with the city services. We can see it in several examples like Harvard in Boston, or for example French universities, and Sorbonne is one of the good examples here. Probably any French university is an example of a certain university occupies a whole quarter. The Latin quarter is not so consolidated in comparison to the London School of Economics, which sold some buildings and purchased other ones. The Sorbonne Pantheon remained a network of buildings located in a walking distance from each other. And now we get an opportunity to include the university infrastructure into the urban infrastructure. So we have an opportunity to provide university services to the citizens and the city or urban services to the teachers and students. And I think it is significant advantage to increase the quality of environment in Moscow, especially for some central districts which are characterized by quite a low quality of urban environment. We propose to the city administration to set up the central block of the university development in the northeastern part of the central district within the Boulevard Ring. We already started developing with our main facilities within this district. And I have to tell you that all these buildings that are shown on this map is just the result of our architecture design. It's not real buildings we would like to take. But it's absolutely clear if we develop within this walking distance, we can create in this quite district with a poor density an absolutely new quality of an urban environment. How we're intending to do it? Stage one, we need to fill the historical part of the city with historical activity, and we will regenerate the environment and set up pedestrian streets. Stage two, we will create an active and university life and services with galleries and clubs servicing the students and teachers. And stage three, we will set up a campus which will attract restaurants, youth hotels, and other cultural facilities and social facilities, and it will become attractive not only for the locals but also for the visitors. It will be kind of tourist attraction. The same happened, for example, with the Latin Quarter in Paris. We can talk now that the creation of an active university life and university services will also develop the sport and free time activity. We will offer open education programs for citizens. We will also open our library. We'll also provide exhibition halls too. We already started this work. Probably some of you may know about the program the High School of Economics is implementing currently in the Moscow parks or museums. And this is called Open City University, and we are planning to continue this activity with this district shown on the map. Thank you. Thank you, Yaroslav. That was a classical example of a lecture. And you start talking about the general things, and then you started saying what you would like to see in the future. And the next speaker and guest is Patrick Shane, and I can compare him with the experiments which are undertaken in another Moscow district, because Patrick is specialized on innovative clusters. He will tell us about the European and French experience, and normally we associate this experience with Russian facilities in Novosibirsk, Dubna, or Skolkovo University as innovative cluster.
For the introduction, and I'm really delighted to be here today. As you can hear from my accent, I'm not only French, but so my perspective will be half European and half American, because I spent most of the past 15 years in Boston and Cambridge, Massachusetts, and learned a lot there. We have a very limited time, so I'm really happy that both the people that actually talked before me gave you a very good understanding of what the challenges are at trying to figure out the best way for the city and the university campus to interact. So I won't have to touch that point, which is not really my field. And I'd rather focus on other scales, which is what is above this scale of campus-city interaction and what is under or below that scale. Oh, okay, sorry, I went too fast. So to start, I'd like to show you a map that was published by the MIT Technology Review a year and a half ago. And on that map is Paris-Saclay, which I was very pleased about, but also Silicon Valley, Boston, London, Tech City, and Skolkovo. So this map only to show you that every part of the world that actually can afford it is actually looking at innovation-based and campus-based development, because everybody has a feeling this is where the future lies, although no one has the exact solution if there's only one. So this is Paris-Saclay. It's 25 kilometers southwest of Paris, and it's 3.5, the perimeter, I'll show you it later, I'll show it later to you, is 3.5 the size of downtown Paris, which is very, very small compared to Moscow, for example. So this map to show you that Paris-Saclay is actually part of a bigger plan that was designed by the Sarkozy government 5 years ago, when it is called Grand Paris. Grand Paris has the project of connecting various parts of the suburbs of the region together, including the Roissy-Charles de Gaulle airport and area, but also at the opposite, Paris-Saclay, which kind of has its own airport with Orly. The idea of having this global railway connection, automatic metro that is actually pretty interesting in the light of what we just heard regarding how people are looking here in Moscow at connecting actually spaces between them, because connectivity is, we all have a feeling, pretty important. But the other, sorry, let me go back. The other aspect is, anyway, is that in Paris-Saclay area, there's already 15, that's 15% of the French research and public research and in private research and development. So this is like putting more resources in an area which is already very, very well established in research and development. To give you an idea, 15% is the biggest concentration anywhere in France of research. There's more there than in the whole Lyon-Grenoble area, for those of you familiar to it. Anyway, so this project is about putting more resources in an area which is already pretty well developed, and it's a paradigm shift for the French government, because for the previous 30 years, the government was trying to kind of level the ground by incentivizing universities and large companies to locate in various areas to kind of, moderate the growth. And the idea this time is to put everything in one place and then have a spillover effect that will contaminate the whole economy. And before we get into that, I'd like to take a quote from Dan Bresnitz, one of the economists of innovation I most respect for various reasons. But recently on his blog on the Harvard Business Review, he asked a very interesting question, which is, everybody's focusing on innovation-based development, but why? What do we expect from that type of growth, and how can we foster it? This is a question where there are a lot less answers, so it's a bit like the interaction between the city and the campus. We have to figure out ways that could work, because actually nobody has really attempted to do it so far. And to quote the very piece that you just saw in small, this is bigger character. The question, the way Dan Bresnitz frames the question is, to me, very interesting. Because innovation-based economy actually relies on business models and markets that don't exist yet, it's very complicated to have a central or centralized policy that could then generate all subsequent growth, because we don't know which company will succeed and which company will fail. And we don't know that by a very high uncertainty factor. Actually, at best, 1 in 10 companies succeed so far. So it's very difficult to base a whole policy on a 10% rate of success. We have to figure out other ways to enable continuous experimentation so that we build from the ground up with startup companies and we attract companies from the outside. My model, and the best way I could figure to convey it to you, is the coral reef. And this for mainly 2 reasons. One is coral reefs are, maybe they're in peril right now, but are ecosystems that are sustainable over very, very, very long periods, hundreds of millions of years. And this is also something that we're interested in creating innovation-based cluster, is that the growth we're going to generate will go on for a very, very long period. And what we learned from the coral is that it's a very diverse biodiversity I'm talking about. It's a very diverse ecosystem where every niche is actually occupied by very, very different actors. And the other thing we learned from that model is that at the beginning, the waters where coral reefs prosper are not characterized by having a high level of nutrients, which in economic policy generally translated to subsidies, incentives, tax breaks, things like that. There are other areas in the ocean where actually there are lots and lots of nutrients, only it doesn't last. It's typically seasonal. You would have the sardines go down the coast of South Africa and drag the whales and all the other animals behind them, but this doesn't last. The coral reef, at least until recently, was a very different model where actually life would stay and grow for, again, hundreds of millions of years. The other interesting thing, about coral reefs is that, as I said before, life forms are really, really very different from one another. And it probably implies that we don't have to plan for every life form we want in the economic ecosystem that we're trying to create. We just have to stimulate those at the bottom of the food chain, which in the real coral reef is invisible, very tiny algae and planktons, and probably also make it a bit visible for larger animals, larger corporations to see it and eventually decide they want in. Now, how do you do that? Well, I think you can actually try to modelize it through 3 ingredients. One is content, the other is space, and the last one is network. Space is actually what we've been hearing about, which is the campus and the way it relates to its city environment. So I'm going to focus on content and networks, But just about space, to give you a different perspective, this is what Paris-Saclay full project territory looks like. You can see at the bottom right, at the top right, this is downtown Paris, and this is real scale, right? It's the north of the Paris-Saclay area is Versailles, and it's part of it, and the south is more rural, but you see it touches all the airports. Actually, it's the opposite. It typically takes 20 to 45 minutes, depending on traffic, to go from one point to another. This is an area where we're building 3 new campuses. The team I'm a member of, but my colleagues are the real specialists. The campus west and east are actually connected to one another and are built on top of existing research and teaching facilities. So we're bringing more in an area where there are already things, as I said before. And there's also a network of valleys where there are already housing, well, small cities that are scattered around. So it's not purely artificial, yet what we're using to create the new campuses is free space, which is kind of rare at 20 kilometers from Paris. It's difficult to find this type of space. But this is taking place. Building is starting right now, and the first big University Paris-Saclay opening will be in 4 years from now, in September 2018. Now, same area. What I mean by creating content is giving people that are living there and people that are interested in finding out, so people from the outside, to give them a picture of what is there already. And this is what we have been focusing with my team in economic development in the past 2 years, is we have 5 clusters, industrial clusters, that we want to focus on. So this is one, this is smart energy. The other ones are IT, health. I won't go through them, but if you're interested, we can discuss this later. What is really important is through that we've been able to give even large corporations a precise idea of what's around them. And this is quite impressive in the 5 clusters we've picked. So it gives them a sense that there are probably connections and cross-fertilization, to use a very trendy term, that can happen there. But this said, I mean, we have campuses, we have industry, we have research, and we're starting to give all the people in that area, because they need to know first, a pretty good idea of what's there and what's coming. So what we're trying to do is stimulate them into creating companies, but companies could be new restaurants, could be new startups, IT startups, we don't mind. I mean, it's really about creating activity and making this area a very vivid area before actually we start trying to drag international corporations or any type of investment from the outside. This is my last slide, and this is, so I've talked about what's above the campus. Now that's below the campus. It's creating places where actually this interactivity, this connectivity can happen. This is something we opened 6 months ago. It's a reformed mechanical workshop from the university that was used to maintain an electron accelerator just across the street. So this part of the university dates back from the 50s. But what we did is we just put some painting on the wall, some paint on the wall, sorry, and then we offered the place as somewhere where people could meet to discuss interesting matters or discuss what they want to create, where they can showcase their artistic productions, their prototypes, pitch their company, and it just went off very, very quickly. In 6 months' time, we've been able to host over 3,000 people, and this is a small place. I mean, this was one of the crowded moments. Typically, it's 20, 30 people, not more than that. And we're trying to replicate this kind of space all over this large area you've seen, and taking advantage of what's already there to make people conscious of that their neighbor is probably somebody they want to talk to, because it's somebody also that is interested in doing new things, doing things differently, and so on. So to close it, in that type of space, what is happening is we have open source groups that meet every week to develop new motherboards for data centers, other groups that meet for around big data for scientific projects, but we also have all the physics researchers from Université Paris Sud who meet once a month just to, share a drink and discuss, because they didn't have a place to do that. It's kind of silly, but, bringing the people together, so this is what I call the networks, is what really will make the difference in the long run. And why do I think that? It's because this is what I've experienced around MIT and Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts between 2000 and 2012. I think this area changed dramatically because, yes, it's very close to Boston Center and so on, but 15 years ago, it was mostly empty warehouses. All that area that now has, and across the past 15 years, I don't know how much public investment went into that area, but it's in the size of billions, literally, and it encompassed having large corporations move their R&D facilities there, Sanofi, the French healthcare and biopharma company, being one of the prominent examples, along with Novartis, but it also managed to create a whole locally based cluster in IT, because one of my neighbors in Cambridge was a very small team, very secretive, from Google for a number of years. Then, well, for 3 years at least. They were very small at the beginning and they grew up very rapidly. And this is the team that actually developed Android. And they did it in Boston because it was a lot more quiet for them to do that here than to do it in California and Silicon Valley, where everybody's eyes would have been on them. So what I mean by that is you have to start somewhere, you have to connect people, and you have to give people the correct picture that they're already in an area where a lot of things can happen. And of course, this gives a different perspective to the public investment the state is committing to this area to create the whole Paris-Saclay project. But I believe the local community is something you need absolutely to work with and to make conscious of what they can achieve and do at the very beginning of the process, because they're going to be your local leaders, they're going to spread the word, they're going to convince the people that it's good. Because along with those projects that, as you can sense, are really exciting to people like me, there are other people that have been living in those places for a number of years and that don't necessarily see the project as something that will benefit them. So it's really important that, again, the local community takes this perspective and does not engage into struggling with the project and the changes that it will bring. I think this is something Columbia did particularly well in the Manhattanville project we visited 2 years ago, and I've learned a lot from them.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Пока Патрик рассказывал.
So while Patrick was telling us about the innovative triad, about the space connections and content, I received the illustration about the Russian triad, about the Russian innovations, which is at the brink of science, universities, business, and government. So we have science, business, and government. But I received just a text message by phone that science is present here, but unfortunately government and business is absent. We have another example. This is China. Wan Hui from Urban Architecture and Design will tell us about something very interesting. By the way, the presentation has different titles. In Russian and English. In the Russian, it's called The Advantages of Centralized Planning When Building Modern Campuses, and in English it sounds as the opportunity of using advantages of central planning when building modern clusters. This is nearly the same, but there are some nuances. So the floor is yours, Hui Wang.
Just came over here too earlier, so I missed part of your introduction, but I believe it should be very beautiful. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak here. And my topic today is urban clusters and how to make urban clusters benefit from the centralized power planning model. This topic may sound a little bit annoying because I'm using the term of centralized power. Let me explain first. Both China and Russia have a strong socialist tradition in the pattern of governing, although neither of them nowadays falls into a pure category of totalitarianism. It is always a taboo to discuss the advantage of centralized power in planning. However, in line with China's rapid urbanization, the merit of such a planning model is obvious. So today I would like to present some of our designs based on a total planning approach to my Russian colleagues and to share feedback from you that may have the same experience. Also, my topic today is not about a specific concept of the campus, but the term of campus as a planning concept in general, and the role of architectural design as a provider for the infrastructure for such kind of campus. Campus can always be conceived, I'm not sure, yeah. Campus can always be conceived as a group of buildings forming a community with a certain kind of identities. This kind of campus or clusters ask for a special planning strategy that emphasizes on coordination, adaptation, and optimization. Therefore, it asks for a centralized power model in planning. From these two maps, we can see like clusters actually is the very form of human satellites, of human settlements. And if we look at the general picture of the city is actually a very homogeneous clusters of settlements. But if we take a closer look from the point of view of the social or political or even from the economical, then we'll see the city is actually composed of the clusters. And on the other hand, what is the modern urban or architectural strategy which can provide a pattern of the infrastructure for this cluster? This kind of infrastructure is actually the grid system. The grid system is a very monotonous system, but the advantage for this kind of system is a very good way for the real estate speculation. So in this sense, when we look at most of the successful cities in the world, such as Barcelona or Manhattan, we can see how grid system prevails. But the shortage for grid system is actually it helps to dissolve the urban clusters. So when we take a look of this kind of comparison, on the right-hand side, we can see the clusters are actually dissolved into a grid system, and we can hardly recognize the clusters. A very good example for this kind of simulation of clusters by the grid system is actually Daniel Libeskind's scheme, his master plan for the ground zero. When just right after the 9/11 event disaster, Daniel Libeskind presented a winning master plan for this area, and the whole plan is actually composed of clusters of identical buildings which form a very strong identity and which tells a very consistent ideology. But later on, if we look at this area nowadays, actually the whole buildings are no more than individual buildings like those skyscrapers in Manhattan. So this kind of phenomenon is actually described in Rand Koolhaas' Delirious New York. He used the term of a city of captive, sorry, because it's too far away for me to see my slides here. I think he used the term of a city of captive globe, which means, like each building is actually sitting on its lot and trying to present a very much, self-representation, try to compete with each other. But the whole city is united in a way by the grid system. But also we can find another example, which is the Rockefeller Center, planned about half a century ago. During that time, the planning power is sort of concentrated, and we can get this kind of identical group of buildings, and which still today is a very, very vivid urban cluster or urban place in Manhattan. And then I'd like to give my argument on whether the centralized power has its benefit and how to take advantage of this centralized power in planning. In comparison with scattered power, I do believe there are lots of advantages of the centralized power in planning. Although from the top 3 examples, you can see lots of disadvantages of it, especially centralized power is always related to bureaucracy. For example, the first one is an example of the CBD Center in Tianjin, which is planned in less than 5 years and will be built in less than 10 years. And it's a whole cluster of identical high-rises buildings and with any kind of that kind of vivid urban texture. So it's just like each building occupies one urban block. And in the Art Center is another example, which is very typical in China. That is a culture center. The whole cluster is composed of opera house, art museum, library, and so on. This kind of cultural programs. And actually, it shows a gentrification of the programs that no other things can be part of this kind of cultural institutions. And the whole area, although it looks quite nice, and also the design is always invited for foreign architects or famous artists, and etc. But indeed, the final implementation of the design is very, very dry. And the right-hand side on the upper example is isolation of the university campuses. This is a very stupid concept in China. Like we are facing with aging society. After 20 years, about third population in China will be the elders. But the China's planning system tries to isolate universities from the center of the cities. So the government gives lots of lands to universities, but the students are totally isolated from the major urban area. And in contrast to such kind of disadvantages of the centralized planning power, centralized power in planning, I think there are still some kind of efficiencies for it, such as it can do something better in optimizing the resources. It can be much better in adapting new conditions, and also it can help each individual buildings to operate with each other and to coordinate with some things. So in this sense, I would like to present 3 of our designs. And these designs, actually, we have to ask for a certain kind of top-down, this kind of centralized power system to coordinate each individual building to make a very, very vital whole. And the first design is a proposal for the Olympic Cultural Center. And in this map, you can see, like the lower part one is the Olympic Stadium designed by Professor de Maron for the year 2008 Olympic Games. And the whole area is huge. And I don't know whether the laser works, maybe it doesn't work. And that part, on the right-hand side, upper right-hand side part with the blocks is actually a planned area for the cultural center. And right now it will be, the National Gallery and the National Science Center, National Arts and Craft Center, and some other institutional facilities. And from the comparison of the 2 models for those kind of line drawings, on the left-hand side is actually the original plan, and on the right-hand side, we add lots of small objects into this big campus. And from this drawing, it is obvious that this campus is not only made of bigness, but it's a mixture of bigness and smallness. And the advantage for this one is we are inviting lots of small facilities, small galleries to participate into this urban campus and make it more flexible and more vital for the general public. And also...
Van Huy, sorry, I just told you that you have another 3 minutes, we need to do it fast.
Okay. And also we try to connect them in session, trying to bring them as a whole. And the second example is Beijing CBD core area planning proposal. And also we can see, this kind of grid system actually is a typical system to assimilate all the buildings into the home. And what we propose here is actually we try to bring the individual buildings together from their bottom part. And this part can be connected into an organic pattern. And this organic pattern not only provides commercial facilities, but also provide culture, educational, and all other kind of facilities. And then, to make this one as a whole piece instead of, individual buildings within a central area. And the last one actually is town center for future science city in the suburban of China. And from this map, we can see, the original area actually is got from a farmland, and we saw the farmland is a very unique and very vital resource for this campus. And we did some kind of clutch study to see whether the rural can be composed into a scenario of the city, and it looks quite successful. And in this sense, we're trying to make a rural as part of the urban area. And the most important thing for this one is because this kind of occupation of the former farmland also asks its original farmers to be shifted into a city season. And this kind of transitional situation may cause lots of hard time for the farmers. And this kind of planning strategy actually gives very, very successful model to help those farmers to be adjusted to the new social system. Okay, so in short, I think today, especially in countries like China and Russia, we still have the tradition of this kind of centralized power, and how architects will take advantage of this centralized power is a very, very critical issue, and it is an opportunity, and we should cherish and take the most advantage for this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Манхуэй. Спасибо вам, слушатели.
Thank you so much for being so patient and listening to our panelists. And now we have a Q&A session. But before that, I want Tatiana and Andrei express their opinion about what they heard. Everyone has their own views and perceptions. I want you all remember that campus is the place where the modern and free specialist is growing and is being educated. And for us, so let's consider what are the impediments and what are the growth drivers for campus growth, which help us to educate people, and this is not something isolated. Tatiana, let's start from you. Thank you, dear colleagues. Judging by what I heard, partly confirmed some of my thoughts. In particular, as for the social and cultural features of campus, well, you see, a campus is a dedicated space, and this dedicated space splits the world into ours and others. This is a specific corporate culture on the one hand. As for the fact of belonging to the university, it's the understanding of another role in the world. And one more aspect which I believe is very important is that the campus is the institute for growing up, because you must live in a campus. It means that you are no longer in the old environment which influenced you, which developed you, and now this is the campus which assumes the new function and makes people be more independent. But when we destroy the space, we don't understand what other tools for people's development we have in the university. On the other hand, a campus is a very rich infrastructure of space. It's very saturated infrastructure, and this is important. The economic function of the campus, which has been mentioned, implies the concentration of resources, not only such resources as lecturers, professors, or human resources. This is the concentration of time. Yaroslavl has said that it takes students a year, for instance, to go to the campus during the year. So it takes so much time that they have to take commuter trains to go to the campus. I haven't been traveling by commuter trains for so long. Yes, and the concentration of time is such important factor, and we can concentrate this time due to a specially dedicated place. We can save this time. We can attract science. We can attract culture. What I want to say that campus, due to the dedicated space and due to the concentration of time, ensures a more intensive activity of different levels, at different levels. It means different types of activities, main type of activity and some supplementary types of activities, and the combination of various activities. But in the end, we see positive results. Yaroslav has already said that the dedicated space, that the space is usually dedicated in the conditions of a city. But how can we provide such a space when the city opposes this process? We unfortunately haven't discussed how such problems can be overcome. But this was mentioned as one of the problems when we speak about different architectural problems, different architectural projects, how to make a system unanimous when there are different parts in it. And the last thing I would like to say is that now we see lots of challenges, quite serious problems. You know that in many countries there is the common higher education. 182% of grown-ups are enrolled in the universities. In Finland, 94%. In South Korea, 96%. In Russia, 76% go to universities. And when we see that the majority of people go for higher education, we have an absolutely different task in organizing campuses and organizing higher educational institutions. Because on the one hand, campus is a kind of elite. On the other hand, it should be democratic. And this space, the space of campus, will see in the future the inflow of youth, of young people, and I believe we just could discuss this topic at the next urban forum in Moscow. Well, it was a very optimistic idea to meet next year. Andrei, I wouldn't wait for the next year because we have a few minutes and we can. Being an architect, I like to make ideas real. It seems to me that here we can discuss what Tatiana told us. But here we should speak not about the architecture or about the space. We all understand the different types of spaces are determined by the activity, by the type of activity that people do. I would like to go to another dimension. I would like to part from the architectural dimension. So now we touched upon different types of universities. Yaroslav showed us several types of universities. When you go to Morocco, to the first historical university, to the first university which appeared, you see that the university is integrated into the city. You cannot say where the university is and where the city is. But when you come to Moscow, you see a gigantic Moscow State University, which is mostly located on Vorobyovo Hill. This is the highest hill of Moscow, behind the Moscow River and between two ways. You could see also the campus within the city, but it also has a building close to the Moscow Kremlin. So you have at the panelist, you could see that in the center we have Saxon representatives, and on the right and left side we have representatives of former totalitarian regime. So our campuses are isolated from the cities. In other campuses, in other countries, campuses are not isolated. So as you see, the structure is determined by politics. University is an interdisciplinary thing. And we can have very many universities. Moscow, as any megacity, has the University of Steel and Alloys, a mining university, Institute of Oil and Gas. And maybe you can think that they have nothing to do with Moscow, but at the same time we have the Institute of Culture and so on and so forth. But we should speak about some other things. I visited Tomsk several times. This is the modern city where students are more numerous than common people. And this is like Cambridge, and when the campus is, or the university is in the center, and the city is around the university. For the next year, I would like to offer the following know-how, so to speak. I think we should discuss the integrity of the university or an institute into the activity, into the life of a city. I am the graduate of the Moscow State University, and now I'm professor there. I assure you that quite a low share of postgraduate students deal with the problems of the city. I don't know any other project. I don't know any other project when the senior students of the architectural universities or urbanist faculties included interdisciplinary approaches. For instance, when sociologists or demographers and economists diplomas are combined with diplomas of city planners or designers, when students have knowledge from different faculties. But I believe when we have the team of different experts, it's great, and at the same time they manage to tackle the problems of the megacity, of the city they live in. This helps to establish the new connection between the disciplines, between different areas. You could see the relations. And the city sees that those students who sit in the cafe, they go in for sports. Unfortunately, sometimes they violate laws or whatever, or sometimes they consume lots of drugs and so on. So these students try to meet the interest of the city, and then city opens up to such students. It provides buildings, public spaces, and all the rest things. This must happen. How to develop all this in every specific city, in every specific economy, is another issue.
400 American venture funds have 25–30% of the pension fund. It is forbidden by law in Russia. We have different economic models. We have another relationship between the city, municipalities, and universities. But in this situation, despite what the moderator said, when we expected not to have any business or power anymore in the future, we have to construct this problem in a different way, because if we talk about the joint programs between the city and the university, can lead to another program. It is a program of generations, because a city unites all generations and the university unites normally 2 generations if we don't take into account the old teachers. Because we can say that the university can be the core in the relationship between the generations of a city, because on one hand we may have children which can be supervised by the upper year students, which can also create their own mini cities within the city festivals, and we can also construct the relationships with the elder population of a city. And I think it is very important, because if we discuss and implement these types of programs and tools, which are quite possible for the city and for the university. Well, this is, we can open the moment of creativity when the creative people and creative initiatives can compete and support each other at the same time, because it is quite typical for human being to create something new, to open and to implement yourself. Only the power of love is stronger, and in this case, these types of programs can resolve the problems which we are considering from the urban science or architecture or bureaucracy. Thank you very much. We have 4 minutes left, and I would like to thank everyone and those 3 of you who are left. Victor, how far the speakers were from reality, because you are the mayor of Troitsk and you haven't got a new university campus. You have 3 minutes left. Several years ago, when I was the mayor of Troitsk, and Yaroslav was not sticking to Model 4, he was actually propagating the Model 1, and we were discussing the opportunity to construct a campus in Troitsk, and it was an opportunity for Troitsk to survive. And when we were discussing this opportunity, the director, the principal of the best Moscow school in Troitsk, said that we didn't need the campus because students means alcohol, drugs, a lot of noise, so it was not really useful to discuss it with as included into our master plan. And I had to reply on it with the story when in the 16th century, when the Spanish were surrounded the city of Leiden, and Wilhelm Orange freed the Leiden in Netherlands, and he offered the people in Leiden to choose one award, either to construct a university or to introduce the tax-free regime for Leiden. And can you imagine what the people in Leiden decided? Now the University of Leiden is one of the most famous in world, is the main employer in Leiden. But at that moment, the citizens of Troitsk decided that they really wanted to get this campus, but unfortunately Yaroslav chose another model. But we think that the cities like Troitsk can also get this model, because you already mentioned Coast, Cambridge and Oxford, because the science cities are those who have the really fully dedicated to innovations, because Socrates used to say that city and villages are different things because they have different activities, but in no small village we're all busy. And now we are currently trying to dictate to the new Moscow this way of development, because for us that's actually the sense of life. And I think for the next year we need to add new to Moscow Urban Forum and to spend 1 day in New Moscow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you. We will wait as soon as Wilhelm will occupy us in order to get a new university in Troitsk. Thank you very much. See you next year.